Hello, this is Mike Frank. I'm a MySQL Product Management Director at Oracle. Today I want to talk about setting up MySQL Linux with OpenSSL 3 and FIPS. And obviously, FIPS 140-3 and ISO IEC 19790 go together. And so if you're also looking for ISO, this FIPS setup should meet what you need. So, before I go into this, I think it'd be good background to first read my blog on this topic. So um, that way you'll understand some of the nuances. So, please do that first. But then after that, if you're needing to go in and set up FIPS, I want to share a few things that I learned while doing it. And so one is that, you know, OpenSSL 3 FIPS 3 is or will be 140-3 compliant. And in September of 2024, FIPS 140-2, should be phased out. And so I think it's really best to go on to a modern operating system um, like Linux 9. And also, I think it's important to realize that things like post quantum computing proof algorithms are going to be going on to OpenSSL 3. And so, really, you should be moving on to these newer operating systems that have it built in. So, I think first step really should be to see what version of OpenSSL you have installed, um, and to look and see if the OS is in FIPS mode, and to see if the OpenSSL config is in FIPS mode. For my purpose, right, we're just going to start with a fresh system that none of that's on there. And so I look at the version. I've got one from 2022. The way I have my DNF set up, when I do an update, I'm getting the OpenSSL 3.2.2 on there. Depends how you have things set up, but anyway, that's what I did. And obviously, once you get it, especially with libraries like this that affect security, it's important to restart your system in most cases. So that's sort of the recommended best thing. Now, but before you do that, uh, you need to think about a few things. First of all, should you set OS and OpenSSL config to FIPS mode? I think the answer probably for most is probably, but you can set up OpenSSL 3 to just work for certain applications in FIPS mode and not for others. These might be things you have to explore based on maybe having non-FIPS capable applications installed on the same server. But you really should test all this out on a full stack and make sure you don't have any issues. So be careful, right? So the next thing you have to do before you restart is that you want to make sure that you can get back onto your server. And I managed to do this a couple of times and couldn't SSH back in. And I finally realized, that I needed to make some changes to SSH. And so I needed to regenerate the keys, and I needed to change the setup to where it wouldn't use non-FIPS compliant algorithms when it negotiated a connection. So I had to generate a new passworded PIM EC based private key, right? So you need to have a FIPS compliant, crypto when creating the key. And then on the server, I had to make sure that I set up the OpenSSL SSH.config to remove um, non FIPS compliant algorithms from that, and then do a restart of that. SSH for somewhere else. Make sure you have it right um, before you actually restart the whole server. And so this is just an example of what my file looked like, and it's shorter. I removed some of the RSA keys and things like that on here, so you can sort of compare it. But your operating system OpenSSH documentation is going to have information on that, and that's where I obtained mine. So to check, see if it's enabled, right? Sudo FIPS mode setup check. And then if I want to enable it, I just do the enable. And then after I've rebooted the server, which you have to do, I can go in and I can see that it's been enabled here, because either doing the check, or you can list the providers and it will show up. Okay, so after you do that, one of the things you'll note is that MySQL in this version just still says, hey, you don't have FIPS mode on if you connect. That's not really true, right? It is on, and so we need to fix that because it's confusing. In the cases for older versions of OpenSSL, where we configured it through the application, right, this mode would show on or off based on what you did. But when you're working with OpenSSL 3, all the configuration for it is through it and not through MySQL. So the other thing I can do, right, so I showed you how to enable it with the OS, but I also need to enable it through OpenSSL configuration. And so I just do a version-d. It tells me where the configuration is. And then you'll see in there is a FIPS local that you end up adding to the OpenSSL comp. And there's several other things you do. I'm not going to go through each one, but follow the steps very carefully on this particular, making all applications use FIP module link I have here. And then, obviously you're going to check it to see if it's in FIPS mode after you've done it. So say after I've set the OS FIPS mode, I run a test. And I run this test and I use a non-FIPS based definition of TLS, the Cha-Cha 20 Poly 1305 SHA-256. It's going to fail. And if I use a FIPS compliant cipher, it'll work, right? So that's what I would think. But then if I try to do an MD5, right, which is not FIPS, it fails. I mean, it works, excuse me. So why does it work? Well, turns out MySQL relies on the property of the FIPS being set in the configuration file, and I believe that when we're doing TLS communication and stuff like that, it must somehow go through the kernel. And so that's probably why that's the case. And so you have to really set up both of them. And my slides are a little out of order, but this, when I set up and define, I have that include, but then I'm going to define that I'm going to use a FIPS provider, and I'm going to activate, and I'm going to set the default property FIPS equals yes. Okay, so that's part of that configuration file. So now, after I do that, if I try to connect and run MD5, it's going to fail, right? It's going to say SSL FIPS mode error. And of course, this is another good way to test to make sure you have your setup right. So what if I didn't enable the OS FIPS? Well, it turns out that if I did that, right, I'm disabled, MySQL is still going to enforce FIPS mode, and it's still going to enforce it at the TLS level as well, right? So I guess you don't have to enable the OS FIPS mode, but I would think in most cases, if you're having to do this for some reason, the reason could include having to do it for all the operating system as well. And so really that's it. I hope this helps out, and I hope some of the mistakes and errors I made initially when I was trying this out will save you some time.